fact that acrylic has a very low brush drag, and that the paintings of that period that are in the show would be Welder. He just snapped. I mixed the paint myself from pigment dispersions, and I had a broader palette of organic pigments, which are really high intensity and kind of transparent. And you know, oil paints, you have to really fight the paint to make those, to give. First of all, you couldn't get oil paints in those particular pigments at that time, and then you know, you'd have to use so much oil and medium that your paintings would be really slick and kind of brittle and stuff if you were trying to use oil to do those things. I mean, let's put it this way: you could do it, but you would have had to make workarounds to get that to all happen. Whereas with acrylic, because of the low brush drag, it just flowed. So that allowed the longer mark to occur, a shift in scale to a larger scale, which sort of allows you to kind of enter the space, which is not the way I thought of it before. I was always outside of the painting. The painting was always a contained thing that was in front of me. And when they started getting bigger and the marks started getting broader and longer, then all of a sudden the space could be kind of empty in the painting, and you could sort of feel yourself getting inside of it somehow. And the marks became their own thing. Instead of being a means to an end or a purely descriptive form, they started describing themselves, you know, if you will. And to me, that's always been a kind of a distinction to me. I've never ever really claimed making abstract paintings, and the reason is that when I do an abstract painting, it becomes a thing. The abstraction is a thing. It'd be like a if you're going to make a sculpture of a form. To me, that's not an abstract sculpture because it's a form. You know, I mean, it's a thing. It has weight and mass, and that's the way I thought of the marks, as having this kind of mass and this agenda. They weren't means to an end. They were just the stuff in the painting, equal to the images, which I kept sticking in the painting in order to sort of create a foil and create the reading of the marks as the thing. So it took the two things to make that, put that whole kind of set of elements, put them in place spatially.
Yeah. With respect to the mark, to take a step sideways, drawing, you know, which we have none of the drawings in the show upstairs. It's interesting just to look at you, you know, as a painter, you know, just the paintings unto themselves. But drawing has always played a central role in your process, and the transition to acrylic seems to be kind of important for, I guess, a merger between the two. But if you could talk a little bit more about drawing, especially since your work, so much of your work hinges on the mark.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, that's probably where a lot of the more dramatic abstract elements in the mid-period and later work come from, is from the small ink drawings that I've been doing over the years that are sort of working drawings. I mean, those of you who haven't seen them, they're like 9 by 12 sheets of paper, kind of yellowish, and they'd have a simple black ink and brush image. And I've been doing that for years, and sometimes an image that was created there would find its way into a painting, but most usually I would just sort of locate my thinking or figure out what might be going to happen if I decide to paint today, what's probably going to come out. Mm-hmm. You know, it sounds strange, but that's sort of the way my process works. And in a few cases, I've realized that the drawings are sort of ahead of the paintings. Like the drawings are a more stripped down language. They get away with things that you can't get away with in the painting because you have to describe so much in the painting. Whereas with the drawing, it's more poetic in that, you know, one of those bigger brush marks can have 2 or 3 edges and also a sense of form in and of itself. So it's a much more of a shorthand medium. And so when I would paint from those, I would usually try to build in with color and you know, texture the things that I see in the drawing that aren't actually there. So you know, I'm sort of anyway. When I shifted to acrylics, I could all of a sudden scale do the same marks that I would do in small scale with the ink and brush. And I mean, this is a kind of a Franz Kline thing too. I mean, Franz Kline did this same thing by doing ink and brush paintings in a phone book, and you know, I don't know if he projected them or not, but But that's how he arrived at those compositions, was in a very small scale and then blowing them up big. They weren't the big spontaneous marks they appear to be, but they were small spontaneous marks, and it's the same with those upstairs. When you see a big dramatic, like in the He Just Snapped, the painting with all the big red marks in it, you know, those came from a drawing, and that particular piece, I can make it, it's kind of distinct from some of the other work in that it is a completely preconceived image where I found the background, I created the drawing, I went through several different iterations till I found the perfect marriage of image and background image and drawing image to create this this idea that I was thinking about. And so so I rehearsed those marks a little bit, and then I mixed up the paint to do what it does, and put them down directly and simply like they would have been in the drawing. But I couldn't have possibly done that spontaneously. I wanted to appear spontaneous. They had to be canned, you know.
Yeah, but it's interesting I mean, that painting seems, you know, in one respect, like a logical conclusion of the problem of separating the mark from the space, you know, and bringing it in a very with a very clear intent to do so. Yeah. So, you know, addressing that as a problem, front and center. But on the other hand, it seems like it takes, you know, even though that represents a sort of a conclusion of one line of thinking, it also moves away from what is, I think, of a central aspect of your work, which is sort of the empirical, improvised nature of how the painting comes into being. You know, so much of it is like process, procedural, it seems, you know, and I'm wondering if you could talk about that in relationship to the drawing, you know, in terms of how do you find the paintings? Well,
I mean, my current work, particularly the tempera works, again, it's a kind of a dumb nuts and bolts procedural thing that allowed those tempera paintings to become what they've become. In that, when I discovered tempera, because I had to teach people how to do it, so I had to learn it, and as soon as I got some books out and some eggs and mixed some stuff up and started painting, it was like this magic moment where I realized that I'd found the medium that I should have been working in all my life, because what it did is it allowed for me to use almost all the other tricks that I knew from acrylic and oil painting, but I also had available my the menu of marks that I had developed through my ink and brush drawing all those years, because it's an aqueous medium. In fact, I use the same brushes to make the tempera paintings that I would use to make all those ink drawings. So all of a sudden it's like, wow, I can finally sort of really conflate the whole thing. The painting is the drawing now, you know. And so when the scale shifts with the temperas, something weirder happens, because the tempera is kind of resistant to scale for a number of reasons. For one, you got to work on a panel, and secondly, there are sort of limits to a brush. I mean, you can't make a brush, you know. I don't know, and you can't get the, you know, I don't know. It just doesn't work when you get too big. There's a natural limit to it. So you have to kind of work within those. The limitations are different, I guess, is what I'm getting at. But because of that set of things happening, it opened up a different avenue into making a painting. So I would start with, I could use the same procedure that I used when I made the Evening of My Dysfunction, where I'd start with this sort of abstract thing, and yet those marks would be part and parcel of the finished painting, so that the translucency and the transparency of the paint, which the tempera has as well, or the acrylic also has, and the same pigments I used in the acrylics I could use in the temperas, those layers of translucency would create more complex color, and those earliest marks could be as visible as the last marks I put on the painting. So there was a sort of a